Right, and it looks like we are finally live. Hello, guys. This is the Liberalists, and we are with a great friend of mine, J.L. Van Dyke. Go introduce yourself, my good man.
Good morning, Frank. Good to hear from my old friend again. I'm J.L. Van Dyke. The J stands for Jason, of course. And I'm a lawyer and an entrepreneur and a firearms instructor in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
All right, and first and foremost, before we get into anything too heavy, too serious, I want you to introduce our audience to the plight of the underrepresented kekisexuals.
Oh yes, this is a huge problem. There are people out there who don't identify as straight, gay, bi, whatever acronym we've added to the whole list today. They're kekisexuals, and these are people who are attracted to a person not necessarily based on their looks or based on their gender, whatever they identify with, but they're attracted to someone based upon how imbued that person is with the power of almighty Kek and their ability to obtain Kek and make memes of sufficient quality. And thus, these relationships are the most pleasing to Kek, and that's the basis for the attraction. And this sexual orientation has been subject to discrimination for far too long. It's time we have protections in this country for the kekisexuals everywhere.
I mean, the oppressed acronym needs the K. It needs the K.
It does absolutely needs the K.
And so, I myself am a kakisexual. I found a woman who memes sufficiently. She is a bit of a normie in the sense that she prefers the cute otter meme.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so, so
Well,
there's
you,
that.
you can work on that. I'm sure that as she continues to be influenced by Keck and Prophet Pepe, peace be upon him, that her memes will become of even greater quality, and your relationship will be continue to be blessed by the green one.
Indeed, indeed, and blessed we are, blessed we are. Anyways, so you have a tale of infamy. And
Yeah, yeah, I
recently
do.
you've had a victory in that regard. Take me back to the beginning of the start of this this case of infamy, as I refer to it.
Well, well, I would say that this case, a lot of people think it started recently. It didn't. I would actually say it started in November of 2016, possibly earlier than that, where I really kind of started becoming internet famous, so to speak, as an attorney was even before November 2016. It was in between late 2012 and mid to late 2014 where my law firm decided to take on a case of a young girl at the University of North Texas who was a victim of revenge pornography. Now, for members of your audience that don't know about what revenge pornography is, what it typically is when two adults in the course of a relationship share naughty pictures of each other. And as most relationships do, the relationship goes south, and one of the parties as a means of revenge, decides to post these pictures online for God and the rest of the world to see. But that's not what happened here. What happened here was the person I represent actually kept some of her naughty pictures on a private photo bucket account, and the private photo bucket account got hacked, posting sexually explicit pictures of young women. Of course, they'd done nothing to verify their age. So, as far as I know, there was child pornography on this site. I can tell you that my client was over the age of 18,
Oh,
but
good
as
God.
I can't represent to you that all of the pictures that were on this website were of young ladies over the age of 18. But my job was to essentially get this website taken down. And as you're aware, typically once something's on the internet, it's there forever. And I
Yeah.
was very successful in the site taken down, but I was also the subject of attack by computer hackers from the Anonymous Collective, as well as those elsewhere, for my identity. And that of my parents. They demanded that I cease prosecuting the suit. I refused to do it. They wanted a payment from me. I refused to make the payment. And they
Oh God.
published. Uh, I actually took a bit from the movie Ransom, and instead of paying them, I offered the same amount of money as a price on their heads. And I did it publicly on Twitter until I got a call from the FBI, and they told me to stop. But
Wait, hang on. The feds got involved not when they offered money, you know.
I don't know that the feds were involved in this case for some time, because by the time 2014 rolled around, um, these websites were on the dark web, and it was actually the feds that kind of won the case for me, so to speak. But I
All
was
right.
contacted by an FBI agent, was told that my reward offer could interfere with an ongoing my social security number and those elderly parents, and encouraging people to rob us. And this was a guy who was believed to be a prominent African American computer hacker. And frankly, I lost my temper and I did something I should have done. I called him the N word and I tweeted him a picture of a noose and I threatened him. Now, I get it. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. But, when someone attacks my mom, that's going to get me to lose my temper every time.
Well,
I mean, even bad men, men love theirs.
yeah, that's true,
So,
but I don't care who you are. You're running you're running a site like that, and you're threatening someone's livelihood. They essentially doxed you. They're
well,
encouraging people to.
they did, Frank. One of the websites they ran was not just this revenge pornography website. It was a website called Doxbin, where they had lists of people with all their personal information and their social security numbers. And I was actually in a special part of the website called the proscription list, which was people that this website specifically targeted for identity theft. And you can check the records of Denton County. Over the course of several years after that, I had to file multiple lawsuits against credit bureaus, against banks, and other people, not because they did anything wrong, but because my identity. Because you learn as a lawyer that suing a company like that is a really quick way to talk to a human being, and in America. And suffice to say, once the lawyers representing these banks, credit bureaus, and so on and so forth learned what the situation was, the mess was cleaned up very quickly.
Well, a lawsuit tends to do that. So, I'm sorry. I'm hearing this. I'm hearing this story, and these are the bad guys. These are the people that we on the internet tend to hate the most. Um,
Yes, these are criminals, and my case, the lawsuit against Pink Meth, actually kind of became a moot point a couple days before we were set for final hearing in the 431st District Court in Denton County before Judge Bailey, who's I like practicing. I mean, uh, he's one of my favorite judges to practice in front of, and because he gets it.
yeah.
But the FBI actually shut down Pink Meth and Doxbin as part of an operation called Operation Anonymous in 2014, about a week before the court setting. And it turns out that Pink Meth and Doxbin were the only sites that weren't actually selling anything, like a lot of these dark websites that were selling drugs, guns, porn, and stuff like that online. They were the only two sites that weren't commercial that were taken down by the FBI. Now, I can't represent that my case had anything to do with that or not. For all I know, this was an ongoing investigation, but I do think the publicity generated by my case, at the very least, might have put them on the FBI radar. I did not have any contact with the FBI about taking them down. I'm obviously glad the FBI and the other law enforcement agencies they worked with around did the right thing, but I didn't have It's not like I had a contact at the FBI that I called and said, hey, I'll if you take down these websites. It was nothing like that. It was coincidence. I do think my case probably put it on the FBI's radar, though.
Well, okay, excellent. So we get to the point to where they basically doxed you. There was a pending lawsuit against them. What is the aftermath of this debacle?
Well, disaster. Of course, the post that I acknowledge I shouldn't have made. I don't regret threatening the guy because people that mess with my family. I mean, he's lucky that's all he got. But
Yeah.
that tweets followed me for years, and you fast forward to November of 2016. I had made the decision that I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore because I mean I was in private practice at the time. I had about $30,000 or $40,000 in receivables that clients weren't paying their bills. You're allowed to do that as an attorney, by the way. It's just highly frowned upon. And I mean, my background is a debt collection. That was my first job. I've been doing debt collection, representing debt collection agencies and companies in the credit industry for my entire career. And I decided I didn't want to do this anymore, and I decided that I wanted to become a police officer instead because I've got a strong background in firearms, and I reasoned that my background as an attorney would make me valuable to maybe a criminal investigation division within a department or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I applied to a number of agencies. And the simple fact is, a lot of these agencies, when they found out that I was a lawyer, they wanted nothing to do with me because, I
Ooh.
mean, and I get that because the conventional wisdom is that if someone's apartment, I did get interest. I got some interest from a couple departments. You can go to their sniper school, do that type of thing. I had the opportunity to talk to an actual Texas Ranger about what I was doing now, and he had a sit down and a heart to heart with me and said, "Look, you would no doubt be an outstanding trooper. I mean, you're physically tough. You're a smart guy." But he said, "The simple fact of the matter is that you do this. What they're going to do is they're going to put you in a DWI unit probably, and you're going to be doing DWIs your entire career. And if that's not something you want to do for the rest of your life, you might recommend I might recommend you try becoming a prosecutor." And becoming a prosecutor was something I always wanted to do. It was a lifelong dream. It's the reason I went to law school. Never had really gotten any interviews with prosecutors' offices, but I started doing that, keeping my options open. I went and did my polygraphs, passed my polygraphs and everything for the police departments. But at one point in March of 2017, I got a job offer as a felony prosecutor in Victoria County, Texas. I accepted it the next day. The following weekend, my dad flew down. My mother lives locally in Texas. We went to Victoria County to look at houses. Worked all weekend, found one, signed a contract, got it in the title company, and I go home and I basically started packing, sending out all my cases, telling everyone I'm leaving. My start date, ironically, was going to be on my birthday in 2017. It was going to be and so I start making plans, and 12 days before I was set to start this position, I get an email from the head prosecutor, the elected official, Stephen Tyler, who thankfully will not be their elected official in January. He lost his in the primary. Uh,
Uh,
couldn't have happened to a worse person, but and was told that my job offer was being rescinded and I was given no explanation. Well, naturally, I wanted an explanation because my immediate reaction is somebody had run their mouth and spoken out of turn.
naturally.
So I made numerous phone calls demanding an explanation. Didn't get one. Phone calls and emails went completely unreturned. Finally, I gave him an ultimatum. I said, "Look, I've been wronged here. You've just cost me a shitload of money. Thank God I hadn't closed on that house yet. I lost my earnest money on the case. I wanted to take the deposition of the elected district attorney to figure out who had run their mouth because I was hired by another law firm called Carlson, LeBlanc and Rich, and I went to work for them in the interim. And after the whole thing died down in Victoria County, basically, I was working at Carlson, LeBlanc and Rich. I liked the people there. I still like the people there. The people I worked for were very good people. My coworkers were very good people. So I was content to kind of just drop it. And then in December of 2017, this individual named Thomas Retzloff, who I didn't know personally, but I knew by reputation, filed a state bar grievance against me. And the basis for his state bar grievance was that this lawsuit, that he was the person that he admitted in his grievance that I was, I mean, he said other things. He said that I was a drug addict, which is completely false. In my response to state bar, I said, okay, let's find out who the liar is. I'll take a drug test right now. You tell me where to go. And unsurprisingly, the state bar did not take me up on my request. They never requested that I take a drug test. So they probably knew that this guy was full of shit, but they were going to shit can the whole thing because Thomas Retzloff, he's a multi-time convicted felon. He was actually, one of the crimes he was convicted of disseminating harmful material to a minor. The one he did time for, I think, was possession of a weapon on a school campus. I know he did time for it. I have documents that as a condition of his parole, at one point, he was required to register as a sex offender. He's no longer required to register as a sex offender, but for a time he was as a parole condition. So something tells me there's a lot more to that case than him just having a gun on a school campus.
Oh, good
So,
Lord, you're kidding me.
I'm not gonna speculate as to what he may or may not have done. I'm just gonna go by what the court records
hang on. So
say he was convicted of.
He ratted on himself? He just came out of the blue.
Yes, I had, to my knowledge, I had never spoken to this person ever before in my life. Well, from there, I was just like, okay, well, this guy has a felony record. This guy's on the list of what are called vexatious litigants in Texas. And what that means is before they can sue anybody in Texas, they have to get permission from a local administrative judge because they filed so many frivolous lawsuits against people before that they're deemed essentially a menace. And this guy does have a huge history of litigation in Texas. He has a history of targeting Texas attorneys specifically. I'm not going to mention his name. One of them lives in Denton County, which is where I live. There's another that lives in Beaumont that he's targeted. I mean, he has a history of doing this. And so I was content to just let the state bar do their investigation and ultimately come to the conclusion that the guy's a whack job.
Fair enough.
Which in many cases they're pretty good at doing, but that's not the case here. What happened was posts relating to this investigation, state bar investigations are confidential. Okay. So he posted a document that only me or him could have had access to on a website called BV Files. And I had corresponded previously with a guy who was an administrator of this website, and that created in me a strong suspicion that Thomas Retzloff and this BV Files website guy who I had talked to in the past were actually the same person. Again, there's no other way he could have gotten this information. If you tried to send a FOIA request to the state bar about the investigation of any attorney, it would be my boss sends me an email, and he had a really nasty email from this guy, from Thomas Retzloff, who uses a pseudonym called Dean Anderson, and saying, I'm a white supremacist, I'm a drug addict, both of which are completely false, saying that I have a criminal record for beating women, which is completely false, and threatening the title company. Now, at first, the title company, which is owned partially by Carlson, LeBlanc, and Rich, they weren't going to do anything about it. Well, what this guy ended up doing, this guy is a paymaster to Nazis, all sorts of other ridiculous stuff, and brought that to the attention of my supervisors, and I was terminated from that employment because of those internet posts that he had made on March 27th of 2018. And I decided, you know what, I'm not going to tolerate this guy costing me 2 jobs in a period of approximately a year, because that's what he had done. And I sued him the next day in state court. That state court case, again, was ended up before Judge Bailey, just out of happenstance. It's a random draw. Judge Bailey actually entered a restraining order to prohibit him from continuing to contact me, contact my employers, and that sort of thing. He ordered expedited discovery and all sorts of other stuff. This guy knew about it. He filed a bunch of really nasty things with the court. He mocked the court, just tried to communicate with the judge over the phone to pigeonhole my case, which isn't allowed. Judge Bailey is a very good judge, a very ethical judge. He wasn't having any of this. He did not sanction Retzloff, but it probably would have come at some point.
This sounds like someone who has no idea who he's dealing with. Like, he just kept poking.
Well, and what he says, he likes to say the words that he is someone who simply cannot be intimidated. And again, that's also kind of how I figured out where he is. There's certain mannerisms that he uses in his emails and his internet postings that are very specific to him. And these type of things further tip me off that this was exactly the guy that this BV Files website, this Dean Anderson guy, this Tom. And so I proceed with my court case, at which point Thomas Retzloff removes the case to federal court. He has the right to do. I had sued him for a ton of money. I sued him for $100 million. And the reason I picked that amount was...
I'm sorry, continue.
Well, and people say, real $100 million. I said, yeah, because I wanted to send, with the amount of images I was requesting, I wanted to send a message. And so he removes it to federal court. He continues harassing me in the meantime. He continues posting information about my clients, reaching out to my clients in the meantime. Keeps prodding the state bar, sends all sorts of stuff to various media outlets. I talked to a few of them. Most of them I told to fuck off. And so this
just want to do.
And this just kept going on and on and on. And there was one point, I can't tell you what it was because it would reveal litigation strategy, where he ended up screwing himself and making a filing with the court that, to me, proved that there was no longer any doubt that him and Dean Anderson were the same person. You know, I'm not. A big company sues somebody for their product. They're not really suing them because they expect to win. They want to run legal fees and stuff like that up so high that the god shit. If I was going to do that, I would proof that doesn't exist anywhere under federal law. It sets timelines for a judge before they have to rule on a motion, and federal courts have long been found by other courts that they have the right to manage their own docket, that a state court has no right, a state legislature. And we're talking about several specific statutes here. One of them is the limitations on discovery. That's in Rule 26 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. It stays discovery automatically, and discovery in federal cases is typically stayed. Most of it is stayed until the scheduling conference, so it conflicted there. It also conflicted with Rules 11, 12, and 56 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which relate to motions to dismiss, the standards of proof required for those motions to dismiss, among other things. So we waited for this court to make a ruling. We had a scheduling conference in the case. He did get an attorney at one point who, up until recently, I've had a pretty decent relation. I'm not completely convinced is a snake, but Retzloff certainly is. I've really got to question the motives of a law to represent a man like Thomas Retzloff. But what happened on the 24th of this month is the federal district judge, Judge Amos Mazant, signed an order agreeing with my reasoning that the anti-law of Texas does not apply in federal court. And people might say, okay, well, the judge ruled in your favor on a procedural issue, and that's not the thing. That's actually a really big deal that has potential nationwide implications. And the reason is because the First Circuit and the Ninth Circuit have made rulings that anti-SLAPP laws in places like, I think, New York and California, that those anti-SLAPP laws do apply in federal court. However, the D.C. Circuit, in an opinion called Alice versus Foreign Policy Group, there's also an opinion by Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who President Trump has now appointed to the Supreme Court, stating that the D.C. anti-SLAPP law does not apply in federal court. So there's already a split among the circuits. Judge Mazant found convincing that my argument that, without ruling on the remaining merits of the motion, he found it my argument convincing that the Texas Citizens Participation Act does not apply in federal court. And so was a really big hurdle case to clear. For my case to clear, Retzloff has appealed that decision of Judge Mazant to the Fifth Circuit, and if the Fifth Circuit rules in my favor, or even if they don't rule in my favor, this is the type of thing that could very well find its way before the U.S. Supreme Court on a procedural issue, because this is going to affect a lot of people.
Well, at least you're in good company. God damn. Well done.
Yeah. And then there are the only other thing that's happened since then is I did agree with his attorney to stay the district court proceedings, meaning we're not going to do anything in district court until the appellate court makes its ruling. I agreed with him on that. He filed the motion, and then he tried to use the motion to essentially re-urge his motion to dismiss under the Texas Citizens Participation Act, said some rather snide things in his motion to Judge Mazant. And yesterday, an order came down granting his stay, but having language in its opinion that essentially spanked the defendant. Mr. Me agree that if this guy contacts them and they fire me because of this guy contacting them, I get to withdraw from the case and they forfeit all money they've paid to me. So that's how I've had to completely rework the procedures in my office to prevent this guy from messing with me. Fortunately, the idiots at the State Bar of Texas believe him that I filed this lawsuit in retaliation for filing a grievance, again, which is complete nonsense, among other things. And he wants the State Bar to take my license to practice law in Texas away for this, and we're going to have a trial on that as well. So it's become an enormous mess.
Well, you know what? You seem to have this down pat, and you're a very smart guy, and you have your shit together.
I like to think so. I'm really not concerned about the federal case. I think that I'm cautiously optimistic that the Judge Mazant has figured out at this point who the bad guy is here. I'm not particularly worried about that case. I am worried about the State Bar thing. I do not trust the State Bar of Texas.
Argument?
Yes, yes, there is, Frank. The free speech angle was one that is basically that everything that he's done to me, that he has a First Amendment right to do it, and I think that's complete nonsense. I mean, it's well settled law that your right to swing your fist ends with another person's nose. And as far as the stuff on his blog, if all he had done was blog about me, I probably wouldn't have sued him. If he had only done that, I wouldn't have sued him over this. I sued him because this is a guy who, once by his own admission, and once by evidence that I think, and then another time by evidence that I strong, continues to interfere with my employment and my law practice. I don't think you have a First Amendment right to do that, and I'm not going to tolerate it when people do something like that.
Well, especially when you're part of the group of people that enjoys doxing, harassing, and stealing from people.
And I don't know if he was. I don't know if he was part of that dox bin or that pink meth group. Given his character, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that he was. I have really, I have real because again, I have no idea what set this guy off. But I mean, if this guy is such a free spot, I think at one point he even distributed nude photographs of his own daughter. I mean, that's what a sick individual this is.
Oh,
But I don't think that's I don't think that's what the First Amendment says, and I really don't think that judges are going to think that that's what the First Amendment says. People are pointing to my case now, and among others, as reasons why there needs to be a federal anti-SLAPP law. And I agree with anti-SLAPP law for what he did in getting me fired from my job, and eventually a court. I mean, that's not what the appeal is going to be about, but a person's employer and try to get them fired. I don't think the First Amendment, again, I don't think the First says that. And the reason I don't think the First Amendment said that is because at the time the First Amendment was written, if you did something like that, you would be probably challenged to be shot. I mean, it is just not something I think that the founding fathers conceived, that there would be people out there that do this type of thing. And punish you for this, we can punish the employer for firing you. We can pass a law that says that if an employer fires you for your exercise of a constitutional right off of company property outside of work hours, not using anything that and something that's not criminal, that they can't fire you for that. And I think
you see, what's troubling me is I'm listening to this case as a whole, and everyone should be able to do what you have done for yourself in defense of their jobs when it comes to whatever they do in politics or they do in their own personal lives. But we don't know how.
absolutely.
And we're not capable to do that. We're not capable of going, okay, who's the rat? Or basically, who got me fired, not for my performance, not for my for the effect that I have on my job, but who got me fired just because they didn't like an opinion.
Exactly. It needs to stop, and the courts and the legislatures need to step in and stop it, because I'll tell you what's going to happen, Frank. Pretty soon, and I think we're going to see it in the next couple of years. What's going to happen is it's not going to be done to someone like me who tries to avoid violence. It's going to happen to someone who's legitimately violent, and that person's going to shoot somebody over it. They're going to find out who did it, and they're going to go to their house and they're going to put a bullet in them. That's what's going to happen in the next couple of years. Again, I wouldn't do something like that, but it's only a matter of time before someone does get somebody fired from a job who has the means and the mindset that they're going to do something like this. And I hope that's not what it takes to get a change in the law, but I think we're going to start seeing that happen. And that would be unfortunate if lives lost over this notion that we can just go around getting people fired from their jobs. And it'd be something that was
part of the issue for me is you can get someone fired anonymously. Like, you don't have the right to in the social sense, confront your accuser, which losing your job is a form of judgment.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, again, I don't I don't have any ill will or resentment towards any Charles LeBlanc and Rich. They were trying to protect their a brand that they spent their life building from a guy who's an absolute madman. And I'm sure part of it also related to the fact that they didn't want to get stalked by this guy. I mean, this guy is a vicious criminal. He's a convicted felon. He is, I mean, from my perspective, uh, fighting this guy and fighting Satan himself is no different. I mean, this guy is as bad. Tom Retzloff is as bad as they come.
Good Lord. But you hear these stories all the time of people just, losing their jobs, and it's because of a few madmen. And that's kind of how you have to define these people. The Antifa, you're, I get
This guy
angry
claims to,
thinking about
this
it.
guy claims to be this guy claims to be a conservative Trump supporter. I think he's just an extremely vicious, evil troll. That's what he is. I mean, this guy claims to be a Trump supporter. I can't imagine a man like Donald Trump wanting anything to do with a man like Thomas Retzloff. I mean, this guy. I mean, he's un-American, is what he is.
Um, well, I can't see any benefit to people like him being part of the community. I would much rather do without. But there
Yeah,
are
he
actually.
belongs in he belongs in prison. He never should have gotten out of prison. Prison is where he belongs. That's why we create prisons. I don't care for the prison industrial complex. I think we incarcerate way too many people. But I'm also against the death penalty. So we do need to have places called prisons where we lock up the Thomas Retzloffs of this world so that they can't harm productive members of society.
Well, into that, but well, this is not all doom and gloom. We do have a silver lining. Tell me about your work with Danger Space Media.
Well, I have a show on Danger Space Media is a company owned by some friends of mine. I have a show on Danger Space Media called "Fuck Your Feelings." We do. I used to do a show with them called "West is the Best." I think they're going to start producing the "West is the Best" show again, where I was a frequent guest host. But my show, "Fuck Your Feelings," it's essentially a show that looks at cultural issues in a way that is humorous. It's a comedy show. We're gonna do some serious shows where I'm gonna have guests and I'm gonna do some interviews. But a lot of these shows are funny shows talking about pop culture. For instance, my first show, which the left has already gone haywire about, was about a story written by Joel Chandler Harris called "The Wonderful Tar Baby Story." It was written in the late 1800s, and we read in its entirety without changing anything the story as originally written by Joel Chandler Harris. Now, for those people who think a tar baby sounds familiar, it does, because this story was adapted by Disney into the story of Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby, which is a story my dad read to me as a kid. I mean, it was one of my favorite things to see as a kid. The ride Splash Mountain at Disney World is based off the Wonderful Tar Baby story, but so many people think that it's a racist story when, in fact, I believe, if memory serves me right, I don't know for sure. This was a story written by an African American based off of tales that people, when they were slaves, would tell. It was part of this Disney thing called Song of the South. They refused to produce it anymore because people find it offensive. In reality, it's a pretty good story. It's about a rabbit named Brer Rabbit who ends up getting into trouble ultimately because he won't mind his own business. It's kind of a cautionary tale, and it's funny. Then there was another story I did on my second episode um, uh, called Little Black Sambo. That was a story my grandmother read me, the story of Little Black Sambo. Again, Sambo these days is actually considered a racial slur. It's based off of this story, again, written in the 1800s. And what I did with the story is I represented at the beginning of my show that I was going to tell a story that I had written. and I called it Little White Jerry. All I did was change the words black to white and gave them different names. Other than that, I told the story as written in its entirety. And there's nothing wrong with this story. The story of Little Black Sambo is about, it's not even about an African American child, it's about an Indian child. Because the story is based in India. There's tigers in the story. Tigers don't live in Africa. They live they're Asian animals, mostly living in India. Some of them living in Russia, and there's nothing racist about the story at all. In fact, the person of color in the story is the protagonist who defeats the tigers. There's nothing at all racist about it, but it's a story that people choose consciously to be offended by when there's nothing actually offensive about it. They just use it as an opportunity to virtue signal. So we told that story on the second episode. This week, I'm hoping to film another episode where I'm going to tell a children's story that relates to gender roles called Dr. Dan the Bandage Man. I'm certainly going to do I'm certainly going to do a show about the plight of kekosexuals. I think one of my friends is actually a high priest to Almighty Kek, and we're going to try to get him on my show as a guest to talk about the plight of the oppressed kekosexuals.
Yes, please do.
But I mean, it's not all it's not all funny. I do have plans where I'm going to try to get a historian and a rabbi on my show, and we're going to talk about another issue that's near and dear to my heart because I'm part of the Proud Boys. I'm a fourth-degree member of the Proud Boys, and there's this narrative the left likes to push that the Proud Boys are anti-Semitic, and this is completely untrue. And I want to do a show essentially lambasting anti-Semitism and showing people all of the many contributions that the Jewish people have made to Western culture. That's going to be a much longer show. Most of these shows are about 10 minutes. Yeah, most of my shows are about 10 minutes long, but I do want to have a serious show person as a guest who can out why the Jewish people are in fact part of the West and how the Jewish people, the important role that they did play in helping to build the West. And again, the show's called Fuck Your Feelings. I'm sure that that show is going to hurt the feelings of many people who are legitimately anti-Semitic. And I really don't care about hurting those people's feelings because I think being anti-Semitic is stupid.
Well, because it is stupid. And on another note,
I don't think it is. It is. You're right, Frank. It is stupid.
On a completely semi-unrelated note, my children still have to hear your own tale of Brer Talib and the Tar Nazi.
Brer Talib and the Tar Nazi. Oh yeah, that was a fun one. For your listeners who don't know, there's a guy out there named Talib Kweli. He was with he's a rapper of some sort. And when I was a kid, I listened to rap music. I was a fan of Dr. Dre, of all the original members of NWA, of Ice Cube, of Eazy-E, even Ice-T. Ice-T had some pretty anti-white music, but I did enjoy Ice-T's music. I mean, now Ice-T has become a successful actor, and more power to him for that. I think he's done better in acting than he ever did as a rapper. But I listened to this music when I was a kid, and I enjoyed it. I never heard of Talib Kweli, but to me, Talib Kweli is an interesting character and almost a tragic character because this is a guy who, and we made a story to make fun of him because this is a guy who who likes to pretend that he's I made the story to make fun of him because this is a guy who who likes to pretend that he's the victim of racism. He quite literally pontificates about racism on Twitter all day. I don't think he has a real job. Obviously, he's invested the money he made in the rap business wisely because I don't see what else he does with his time other than talk on Twitter all day and call everyone a Nazi. But Talib Kweli grew up in a very privileged part of New York. He had a very privileged background. He He came from a wealthy, privileged family. I mean, his brother, I believe, is a Harvard or otherwise Ivy League educated lawyer, and that's great. I want all people, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, whites. I want everyone to have a good education. I like the fact that everybody has the opportunities that Talib Kweli had in this country. And what bothers me about him is, despite his background, which is highly privileged by any standard, this is a guy who doesn't particularly care for America and talks about about how he's a victim and other people are victims of racism on Twitter all day long. You know, he's entitled to his views, but I'm not going to put up with people calling me a Nazi. I'm not going to tolerate people calling other Proud Boys a Nazi. And I also and this man is intellectually dishonest. He is, I think, trying to profit off of racism. And this is another thing I'm going to probably talk about on a more serious show, that on how some of these civil rights organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center turn evil, and how we're seeing some of that with the gay rights movement now. But Talib Kweli is an individual who talks about racism all day, and he doesn't realize there is no real racism anymore. Because here's what happens, Frank. These civil rights organizations, they start off doing something good. They start off saying, well, we think African Americans should be able to sit with whites at the same lunch counter. All right, fine. Yeah, I think
Wonderful.
every reasonable person agrees with that. I think little black children should be allowed to attend the same school as little white children. Yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable. I think they should be allowed to ride on the same seats on the bus. Yep, perfectly reasonable.
Yep.
But then they take it too far. They exaggerate, because what happens is when these movements are created, and again, we're seeing it with the gay rights movement right now. These organizations are created. There's a lot of money that pours into these movements that start off with something that, if it's not good, it's at the very least something that people can live with. And then they get what they want, and the money threatens to dry up. So they take it too far. They exaggerate. Now we have African Americans talk about how guns are racist because Trayvon Martin was killed with a gun, or they talk about how police are racist, and it's a false narrative. And we're seeing it with gay rights right now. I mean, part of my show on gay rights is I used to oppose. I mean, I'll admit I used to oppose gay marriage. Okay, I don't anymore. It is something that I formerly opposed. And one thing I remember saying about it that I've actually ended up being proven right about is, you know what? I don't really care so much about gay marriage. But when we normalize gay marriage, we're going to start normalizing other things, and this is going to get taken too far. And I think I've been proven right about that. In
Yep.
addition to the injustice of these organizations not recognizing the plight of cacosexuals,
Yes.
now now that gay marriage is the law of the land, as I think it ought to be, what we're seeing is the attention is being turned towards transgenderism, and even in some circles, again, I'm not saying these circles are mainstream. I think a lot of people who support gay rights would condemn these circles, but there are some circles where they're saying, well, we need rights for pedophiles. You look at that, and you're like, what? No, I
No.
was fine with gay marriage. Maybe it goes against my religion, but I don't think the government should tell you what you can do as far as your religion is concerned. I'm kind of fine with marriage, but no, we're not going to let
Well, and
children chop
that's
off their
one of the
private parts.
yeah, that's one of the uncomfortable things about being conservative on that issue is we had predictions about this that we didn't want to be right about. We didn't want to be
Yeah,
right about that. That's not something that we would jump up and say, this is something that is going to happen and we want it to happen. No, you don't understand. We're trying to avoid this at all possible costs, and if we're wrong, thank God. But if we're not wrong, this is where we're headed.
Yeah, and the transgendered thing, Frank, is a really good example of this. Again, I'm not afraid of transgendered people. I don't hate transgendered people. Um, I think that, but what we're seeing, especially in Texas, is there's a case involving a high school wrestler, transgendered. Basically, the person is this person is biologically female and transitioned to male during their teenage years. And I don't think that teenagers should be allowed to do that. I mean, it's been controversial. Again, I don't hold this wrestler any ill will or anything like that. But you know what? We don't let people under the age of 18, we don't let them smoke. We don't let them drink. We don't let them own guns. We don't let them enter into contracts. There's all these things we don't let people who are under 18 do. And the reason is because their brains are not fully developed and they can't appreciate or fully appreciate the consequences of their decisions. But we're going to say that we're going to let teenagers or even preteens take hormone blockers, which are going to cause sterility for the rest of their life. We're going to let them undergo gender reassignment surgery, already knowing the extremely high rate of suicide among transgendered people. I mean, you combine that with a good dose of teen angst, because Tom Retzloff is a bully. But uh, as far as the reassignment surgery goes, the hormone blockers and stuff like that, I think it's perfectly fine, and it's not discriminatory for a society to say, you know what, no, we don't let kids do this, and we're not going to. We don't let them have abortion.
There's
You're
some
going to have to. You're going to have to until you're an adult to do that, just like Caitlyn Jenner did, just like Chelsea Manning did. You know what? If you want to do that as an adult, fine, do your thing. Doesn't hurt me whatsoever.
accountable for these things. Um, that I found was really troubling. It started in the, correct me if I'm wrong, but it started in the 1990s when we were trying to solve the gang problem. The gangs would basically take on younger members to commit murder, and then telling them, "Oh, it's okay, you won't get jail time," and then it that trying a child as an adult jumped from murder to sexual offenses for children that are still going through puberty and whatnot. And to me, this is kind of the mirror of that. We're saying, no, not only now you can be an adult and make horrific decisions for your own body at a much younger age when you don't have the mindset to do that yet. Like, you're not done developing, and this is a time when society and your family should be protecting you. Um,
Yeah.
and so, for me, those issues are semi-related.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the whole thing about trying children, adults. I mean, I think when it comes to kids who are part of adult gangs like MS-13 and something like that, and committing truly horrendous crimes and engaging in organized criminal activity, I think there might be something to be said for that. But in most cases, I think the answer to that is no. I mean, there's a reason we have a juvenile justice system. And of course, when a young person commits a particularly atrocious crime, you've got the politicians that want to look tough on crime by trying these kids as adults. And I mean, it's political. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes politicians say okay to them who turn them into drug mules or into some cases into killers or whatever. Why don't we kind of focus on prosecuting them and letting these gang members know that if you admit children into your gang simply because you know that as children they're going to get a lighter sentence if they act as your drug mule or as your assassin, that we're going to prosecute you far more harshly for abusing children in this manner. I mean, that's what needs to happen. I'm all for prosecuting adults who try to use kids as drug mules, as assassins, as thieves, or whatever, and to take advantage of the juvenile justice system. That's what I think needs to be done. Let these folks know there's not going to be an ounce of leniency.
Yeah, it's the adults that need to be held accountable for that. Well, hey, we're pretty much out of time. This has been a been a great stream. Thanks for coming on, man. This was fantastic.
Yep. Anytime, Frank. Good to hear from you again. We'll be in touch. All right, buddy.
Well, hey, good luck with this, with the case that's going on your way. May it go completely your way. Um, keep us in the loop. And hey, if you need anything from the Liberalists, if there's anything that we can help you guys promote, we have a speaker at the Boston Free Speech Rally representing us there as well. So, you know, we've been working with the Proud Boys pretty closely in other chapters and across the country. So,
Okay. Very good.
so
We'll be in touch. All right.
all right. I'll catch you later.
All right. Bye now.